Sadly, your uncle died, you're leaving town for his funeral, you're running behind to get on the road, but you promised the ladies at his church you'd bake his favorite cake for their funeral luncheon. Then you realize you don't have any eggs. Oh, and you forgot to hold the mail, and your cousin won't let you bring the dog. You ask your neighbor for the eggs and someone from church to help with the dog and the mail, and you promise to join them when they volunteer at the women's shelter. As you fall asleep that night, your thoughts turn to the kids. Your son liked that barn work over the summer. He likes animals, he's handy, he's not afraid to get dirty. But the local high school thinks everyone should go to college, so he's not going to learn about farm work there. Maybe the 4-H chapter. Your daughter probably isn't cut out for farm work, but she volunteers at the Humane Society, and she's learning how to show up on time for work and deal with people. The Humane Society needs more help, though. Maybe you could bring that up on the sidelines at the next soccer game. As you toss and turn a little, your spouse reassures you. Your family's always had your back, you have lots of friends, and you live in a strong community. Okay, you say, think about the good stuff. Your thoughts turn to the guys from your uncle's bowling league and American Legion. He loved to talk about them, and they kept him from sinking into depression when his wife died. It'll be nice to see them. Writing about America in the 1830s, Alexis de Tocqueville, one of the great observers of American life, wrote in his book, Democracy in America, Americans of all ages, all conditions, all minds constantly unite. They have commercial associations and 1,000 other kinds: religious, moral, general, particular, immense, and small. Americans use associations for festivals, to raise churches, or distribute books. In this manner, they create hospitals, prisons, schools. To bring to light a truth or develop a sentiment, they associate. Everywhere that you see the government in France or England, you will perceive an association in the United States. Tocqueville rightly perceived a democratic dilemma. Americans want to be free and equal, but their interdependence and independence conflict. The solution is voluntary associations, which constitute what we call civil society. Civil society serves two important ends. First, it efficiently supplies our needs without the government, and two, associating discourages preoccupation with ourselves. It is through what Tocqueville called the reciprocal influence upon each other that we renew our ideas and opinions, enlarge our hearts, and develop our minds. In other words, not only do the institutions of civil society address many of our physical or economic shortcomings, they also improve our social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Of course, you could have bought a cake, downloaded a dog walker app, or Zoomed into the funeral. And as for your uncle's depression, didn't he have insurance to see someone for that? But that wouldn't have been the same at all. When people come together out of love or duty, or simply because they have shared interests or proximity, they build trust and strengthen the bonds of community. They learn about themselves and their neighbors, and they gain purpose and strength. Of course, businesses are great, but they're risky. They have to compete for capital and inputs, overcome transaction costs in unpredictable markets, and make a profit. At the end of the day, they're a means to a financial end. Civil society, by contrast, is usually an end in itself. Furthermore, businesses are hampered by extensive regulations and legal liabilities. Who wants to pay for marketing, HR, and legal departments to get their dog walked or serve lunch at a women's shelter? And if we turn everything into something requiring payment, what happens to people who can't pay? Thankfully, it's not an either-or. Businesses and civil society work together. Civil society relies on people earning money to gain leisure time, to volunteer, and surplus funds to donate. Civil society is often enabled by philanthropic owners or shareholders who use their profits to not just make financial investments, but charitable investments too. In turn, businesses might rely on civil society to instill good habits or solve problems for workers and neighbors that businesses can't or won't solve. The relationship between government and civil society is not so symbiotic, however. Free and equal people don't try to take advantage of each other through politics. That is not what civil society is about. Also, civil society should be free from inefficient, unjust, and unfair political processes. Governments also have every incentive to find and create problems, but never solve them. It often works at cross purposes. We'd have one government agency subsidizing puppy breeding while another limits the number of dogs that can be walked at one time. There would be a Department of Pet Exercise in DC with 5,000 employees and another 5,000 pages of regulations. They'd lock up 9-year-olds trying to earn their allowance without a license. Otherwise, helpful groups like unions or humane societies would be tempted to get in on the action, begging for tax money and monopolies, trying to unionize the 9-year-olds and tax their allowances. The government would create new rights and more programs. Look what's happened to daycare, pre-K, and school lunches, all of which have now become experiments and entitlements. It wouldn't be long before colleges offered majors in dog walking management to earn government certifications. But worse than this, government programs are an excuse to become self-centered. Tocqueville worried that if Americans became isolated from one another, self-interested in the wrong ways, they would lose their freedom to a government promising to do for them what they refuse to do for one another. So, what can you do to build civil society? Work a little less, make new friends, attend some meetings, be a joiner. Maybe find a church, the most popular civil society in America. Ask what you can do to help. Civil society needs you, and free societies need civil society.